Oh yeah, mi gente, you know who this is. I want to just give a perspective from a black American person, a black Native American person. My family is of mixed ancestry. I'm of mixed ancestry directly, black and Native. But I want to speak just in terms of a black Native American at this particular point. What I want to address right now, very briefly and concisely, is this term African American and how it's slapped as a generic label on black people who are natural citizens of the United States. I want to state from my own personal opinion, based upon me being a college student and a student of sociology that teaches you about ethnic groups and ethnicity, race, natural origin, all of those things. But before I even get into that right there, even before I knew those things, I never felt comfortable with that term because my common sense told me I wasn't born in Africa. I was born right here in the United States. So was my mother, so was my father, my grandfather, grandmother, on both sides. Okay? Our mixtures are Native American and black. We also have Latino ethnicity, but I'm just speaking for the racial groups that originated here in the United States in terms of my immediate family line. Okay. A African American, well, let's start out first with what is an American? An American is a person of any race that's born right here in the United States. That means you're a natural citizen. Okay? Let's deal with what an African is. An African is a person of any race. See, I think a big confusion for a lot of people, black and white Americans, is that when they hear the term African, you immediately think of a dark-skinned person. There are white people, there are Arab people, and there are also black people, and even some Asian people who were actually born on the continent of Africa in one of the many countries. Africa isn't a country, it's a continent, all right? And you have many different countries on the continent of Africa. All of those countries have different languages, and some have different dialects of the same languages, have different tribes, all right, with different customs and religious beliefs and all of that. Different appearances. It's just really a very diversified place. All right. So, speaking of, let's even go to England, okay, or Great Britain, and all of the countries that make up that area. Or let's just go to the country of England. You have black people there. You have white people there. You have Asian people there, you have people from India there, you have all, it's a melting pot like it is here in America. So why is it that we, for some reason, when we speak and talk about Africa, we get stuck with one race? There are many different races of people that live there. Whether or not they're original inhabitants of that land is not the point when it comes to natural origin. Your natural origin is the place of your birth, where you were born at. Okay? And then the customs that are passed down to you from the people that you grow up with. That's the custom. So if you have a person that is an African, okay, we'd have to first ask them, okay, well, what country are you from? Then we'd have to ask them, what tribe are you from? Which language do you speak? Right? What's your tribe's colors? These are all cultural things that are completely diverse from one another in terms of Africa. All right? So let's take a look at Australia. Did you know you had different races of people in Australia, black, white, and other races that are natural citizens there? Okay? So I don't know how it is that when we talk about Africa, we think about one race of people. Okay? And the people in Africa, I can't even tell you a specific because there's so many tribes and so many countries there. I don't even know all of them. But the point is, if any of those races, a black person, a black African, a white African, an Arab African, an Asian African, if they immigrate, which means legally move or transfer their national identity to the United States, and it's not just that easy. They've got a process to go through. There is a process to become an American citizen. It takes anywhere from 5 years to 3 years. You can look it up. If any of those races of people, black, white, Arab, Asian, whoever, purple, if you want to, all right, if you want to get really ridiculous, as some of this stuff really sounds, when you try to say that every black person is African American, if any of those races of people from Africa that are natural citizens by birth of the continent of Africa, and really it would be citizens of Nigeria, citizen of Chad, Somalia, wherever, all right? They come to the United States, they go through their waiting period, they take the test, they meet all the requirements. You can't just become an American citizen. If you weren't born here, it is a very rigorous process that you have to go through. Once they go through all of that and take their test and they receive their citizenship papers, then they become an American. But guess what kind of American they become? Because they aren't originally from here. They become an African American. Okay. For an American person, be it black or white or Asian or whatever your race is, if you are a natural citizen of the United States, you are born here, you are an American. And what's offensive to me, and I'm finding other black Americans that feel the same way, is that if you call me an African American, you're telling me I'm an immigrant. And I take exception to that because as I stated earlier, I was born here. I have never been to Africa. And it's not a requirement that I do. Did you even know? And if you research it, you can find it. Archaeologists have found the remains of black people in the Americas that predate slavery, that are thousands of years old. Not every black person or black American is a descendant of someone from Africa. Let me tell you further how ridiculous that is. All right. So for example, just say for white people, and I need to say this also. Jesse Jackson got up in like 1988 or whatever, and he gave a push. I think when he was running for president, 88, 89, somewhere in there, and said we want to be called African Americans, black people. Excuse me, but Jesse Jackson does not speak for every black American in the United States. I don't consider him a personal role model for me as a black American. And now I'm not saying anything to discredit him. I respect him for all that he has done in terms of civil rights or whatever, but in terms of a personal role model for me to identify with, to follow, in terms of me identifying myself as a black person, no, I do not follow him in that manner. And there are other black American people who do not feel that way. He cannot and does not speak for every black American person. So before, and some white people, because they heard this and it's been so repeated in media, they think every black person considers himself an African American, and if they just call them a black person, they're being offensive. No, we call you white, and you don't even identify as a European. In most instances, if a person of any race walked up to you as a white person and called you a European, you will correct us, because you're not going to negotiate or give up your place of natural origin or your birth, which is the United States of America, because if you do that, you're going to negate your rights as a legal citizen to this country and the protections and the benefits that being a legal, natural-born citizen affords you. Well, guess what? It's the same way for black American people. Why should we give up and forfeit our natural-born rights? If we're born here, then it's the same thing. You know, that says second class. To me, that says second class citizenship. That is saying, I mean, the technicality of it is just, it is what it is. You know what I mean? It's like, you're saying to me, I just got here on the ship and I took a test and now I'm an American. That's not correct. That's offensive. Now, in most, with most white people, if you ask them, if we ask you guys, you know, well, what's your family? You said, my family is Italian, my grandfather came here, blah, 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 blah. Okay, you can identify from a historical context. That's perfectly fine to acknowledge that. So I'm not saying that any black American should denounce. If you know that you have an African ancestry, you know your people come from Ghana or Nigeria or whatever, or Jamaica or wherever you come from, that's perfectly fine. But what I'm saying is, if you are a natural born citizen in the United States, you are an American. You are a full American as a white person or any other race of person that is born here. It is offensive to call somebody, you know what I'm saying, an immigrant or second class citizen. Now, some people will be just fine with it, but more people are beginning to understand, look, there's something wrong with this. You know, I call the question, if that's right, then why don't white people walk around and call themselves Europeans? They stopped calling themselves Europeans long ago. Remember back in the Revolutionary War? But even back then, they were calling themselves Americans. They had already made the cultural difference between their ancestors in Europe and themselves here in America. They had built another life, another culture. So that's what I'm saying for those black Americans that are here in the United States. That is a completely different culture than Africa. There's some countries in Africa whose countries are so completely different from American culture. There's some cultures where they don't feed dogs, they're simply ignored, where the women walk around. Let's just do some basic things, all right? Black American women, for the most part, don't walk around with jugs of water on their head. And in some African countries, it's an offense for men to even offer to help the women with those kind of chores. In America, in our customs and in our traditions, it would be an offense for a man to see a woman with a heavy package and doesn't help her or offer to help her or get the door for her. All right? Clothing, dressed out, I mean, completely different. I mean, we don't, as black Americans, we don't walk around, you know, our men don't traditionally like wear robes and, you know, headpieces and things like that. And not saying every African person does, but I'm talking about just the core of a lot of African cultures. It's completely different. We generally don't eat goats and curry and different, you know, the foods are different. The languages are different. We don't speak African languages here. We speak English, you know, for the most part, as the major language in the United States. We don't do the African dances. We'd have to go to a class or something like that. It's completely different. The music, you know, the traditional types of music that we listen to in America are completely different than those countries in Africa. It's a complete cultural difference. So when a person says, I'm an American, we know that's a person that came up in American culture. Their culture is different from that of an African. Their culture is different. If a person says, I'm an Italian, we know their culture is different from somebody that's born in France. It simply identifies your cultural context. The thing that is the same is the race, you know, for black people. You have a black person that is born in America, a black American. You have a black person that's born in Africa. You have a black person that's born in England, a black Brit. You have a black person that is born in Australia or Italy. All those people are black, but they're culturally a part of the nation or country in which they were born. So They would be, if they're born in Italy, they're black Italian or just Italian. But we're dealing with the race factor because people get so confused. So if they're born in Africa, they're black African, or rather, and actually they would tell you, I'm Nigerian, I'm Ghanaian. You know what I'm saying? It's we here in America with a lot of these stupid generic labels we want to put on people, and that we just group everybody in Africa. Oh, you're African. You know what I'm saying? So Africa is a place. It's not a race. It's a place where you have different races of people that live there, that are born there, that are brought up in any of those cultural places. Let me tell you something also. I was walking actually yesterday, and I saw this guy. He was a black guy, and I immediately looked at him and the way he was dressed. And I mean, you can't tell us all the time, but I just got a vibe sense. I said, "Hey, excuse me, Pa, where are you from?" He said, "I'm from Nigeria." I'm like, wow, boom, I knew it. There is just a different cultural context. I know people from Nigeria. I know people from Ghana and different African countries. Those are African people. I'm not African. I'm as much an American as you are as a white person that's born here. So it's different cultures. And there's nothing wrong with African culture. I respect the heck out of it. I think it's, the cultures that I have seen in terms of some of the countries, when I see videos or whatever, I think it rocks. I love their music and what they do. I don't understand what the hell they're saying, but I think it's awesome. I love the way that they dance and they the things that they do, and I just think it's awesome. And I also love the culture when I see, like, on interviews and things like that, Black Brits, the way they speak and the way they do things, it's cool. I have a relative that was born in England, and I love to listen to him talk. It's just so beautiful. I love to hear it. So each place has a different, what I'm saying? Just because I'm a black person born in America, and because there are black people that live and are born in England, I can't jump up and say I'm a Brit. I'm no more Brit than a white person that's born here in America. I'm an American. That doesn't even make any sense. If you really think about the logic, it's very simple. And so I just wanted to say to white Americans, if you see a black person, ask them where they're from. Don't assume that they're an immigrant that just got off the ship from Africa. And let me say this right here. A lot of black people, and I'm not trying to put anybody down. If you feel that you're an African and you're a black American, a black person that's born here, that's your choice. But a lot of people that have been bombarded with being told for years, black Americans, that you're an African American, an African person, and then they claim that a lot of those people don't have any inclination at all to give up their lives here in America, go to an African nation of whatever choice, learn the language, learn their customs, and give up all of the things that they're not going to, most of them are not going to give up their lives here in America. You grew up here, you have an emotional and historical investment in this land. This is the land where they were born, their parents were born, grandparents for the most part, so on and so on. You know what I'm saying? So to jump up and beat, and I've seen some black people do this too, they'll try to beat somebody down for saying, how dare you say you're not an African American? Okay, I would say to those same people who are beating people up, who say, look, I got common sense, I know I was born, I know I was raised, or whatever. I would tell you to go pick a country and move there and learn the language and do the customs and all of that. And if you did do that and legally became an African, you would be an American African, because guess what? You'd be an immigrant. You're not a natural born citizen. And that's fine if you wanted to do that. I really don't care either way to what you want to do. But I just want, more consideration to this term. I mean, what if I just walked up to random white people and start calling them Europeans? That is taken away from the years that you worked and that you built your lives here and that you became a part of this culture here in America. There's not a discredit to where your ancestors may have come from. If you're a white person and your ancestors came from Hungary or Germany or the Netherlands or Ireland or whatever, that's totally cool. But you acknowledge that you're an American. Black people that are born here are Americans as well. Just ask. Just simply ask. You know, it doesn't make sense to call everybody an African American because everybody wasn't born there. And there's some black people that some white people and some black people too ridiculously just want to automatically call every black person from an African American. There's some black people that came from Jamaica. There's some black people that are here from Canada. Everybody's not an African American. Get off the stick and ask people where they're from. The country that you were born and raised in, that's your cultural identity. Culture is obtained in one of two ways primarily. All right? It is taught to you from your people, your family, your relatives, close friends, the communities that you grow up in, or it can be adopted. People adopt cultures, and that's fine as well. You may have a person that's born in American culture, and then later on they get a fascination or interest or whatever, say in Jamaican culture, then they stop adopting Jamaican ways and hairstyles and music and all of that, and they become ethnically or culturally Jamaican because they've adopted, you know, their lifestyle and the customs, and they self-identify that way. So let's just use some respect and common sense about it. And again, for the sake of clarity, if you're a black American, if you're a black person born here in the United States, and after all information that you have received, if you still choose to call yourself an African American, that's your choice and that's fine. Self-determination gives you the autonomy to identify yourself as how you wish, that you are who you say you are. But just have some, you know, knowledge about it. But it's totally up to you. But I wanted to make this video not only for white people, but for black people also. But, you know, for white people that think it's offensive, they, you know, because they've heard these statements from Jesse Jackson, and they hear people now, and a lot of black people that are in media and television, so that they don't lose their fan base, and they'll just use the politically correct term African American to be safe. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, if you really just use common sense and think about it, not every black person is an African person. Africa is a country. Not every white person is a Russian. You know, it's cool to identify if that's where your roots are, but in terms of your national origin, let me tell you something, make it real practical in case you got confused on anything I'm saying. You're coming back from the United States from a different country, you're visiting, and you hit customs, and you're an American, and you tell him that you are African. You're not getting back in here because you cannot pull up any passports or natural papership or whatever that says you're an African and you're returning home. You better say you're an American, because that's what your paper says, that's where you were born. So if you want to get it real practical, so that's pretty much it, you know. So leave your thoughts, and like I say, identify how you want, but just to white people, it's not an offense to call a black person a black person. We call you white, so I mean, what's the thing? And I love everybody. I really don't care if you're black, white, purple, green. It is what it is. But I just don't like that double-edged thing like that, a double standard. It's totally not cool. Ask somebody where they're from. Just like with other white people, you may, if you hear an accent, oh, where are you from? It's cool. And not saying that black person has to have an accent or be dressed in a dashiki, or a black man has to have sandals with his feet out and have a turban on his head. But you know what I'm saying? Before you just say, this is an African American, ask them where they're from. You know, and many people are not offended if you call them black. and and just like I say the same thing as it applied to Jesse Jackson. He's not a spokesman for all black people. I'm not a spokesman for all black people. I'm just stating my opinion, how I feel based on my research and based on my natural common sense of knowing where I was born, where my family was born, the language I was taught, and our religions, customs, belief, based here in America. All right, so live and love, mi gente. Te quiero. Oh yeah, mi gente, you know who this is. I want to just give a perspective from a black American person, a black Native American person. My family is of mixed ancestry. I'm of mixed ancestry directly, black and Native. But I want to speak just in terms of a black Native American at this particular point. What I want to address right now, very briefly and concisely, is this term African American and how it's slapped as a generic label on black people who are natural citizens of the United States. I want to state from my own personal opinion, dialects of the same languages have different tribes, all right, with different customs and religious beliefs and all of that, different appearances. It's just really a very diversified place, all right? So, speaking of, let's even go to England, okay, or Great Britain, and all of the countries that make up that area. Or let's just go to the country of England. You have black people there, you have white people there, you have Asian people there, you have people from India there, you have all, it's a melting pot like it is here. Our mixtures are Native American and black. We also have Latino ethnicity, but I'm just speaking for the racial groups that originated here in the United States in terms of my immediate family line. Okay. A African American, well, let's start out first with what is an American? An American is a person of any race that's born right here in the United States. That means you're a natural citizen. Okay? Let's deal with what an African is, based upon me being a college student and a student of sociology that teaches you about ethnic groups and ethnicity, race, natural origin, all of those things. But before I even get into that right there, even before I knew those things, I never felt comfortable with that term because my common sense told me I wasn't born in Africa. I was born right here in the United States. So was my mother, so was my father, my grandfather, grandmother, on both sides. Okay? An African is a person of any race. See, I think a big confusion for a lot of people, black and white Americans, is that when they hear the term African, you immediately think of a dark-skinned person. There are white people, there are Arab people, and there are also black people and even some Asian people who were actually born on the continent of Africa in one of the many countries. Africa isn't a country, it's a continent, all right? And you have many different countries on the continent of Africa. All of those countries have different languages, and some have different dialects.